The restaurant buzzed with soft chatter and the faint clinking of cutlery, a quiet melody of laughter and conversation that filled every corner. But at one small table near the window sat a young woman who couldn't hear any of it. Her name was Emily, a 26-year-old deaf woman with gentle hazel eyes, auburn hair tied neatly behind her ears, and a fragile smile that tried to hide her disappointment. She had been sitting there for nearly 40 minutes, staring at the empty chair across from her. Her blind date had arrived, exchanged a few polite words after realizing she couldn't hear him properly, and then, without even finishing his drink, murmured an excuse and walked out. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. She looked around the room and saw the subtle, sympathetic glances people gave her, the kind that said, "Poor girl." She hated that look. She had tried so hard to make tonight perfect. Wore her favorite blue dress, practiced reading lips in the mirror, even prepared a small note to explain how she communicates best. But none of it mattered. Not when people saw her deafness first and her heart second. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us spread stories that remind the world how empathy and love can still change lives. At a nearby table, I, Michael, had been quietly observing the scene. I wasn't supposed to be there for anyone. I had come to that restaurant alone, on what would have been my wedding anniversary. My wife, Anna, had passed away 3 years earlier after a long illness, and though I had learned to live again, part of me was still stuck in the silence she left behind. I noticed Emily when her date sat down. I noticed her even more when he left. There was something about the way she looked at the door, pretending not to care, that broke something inside me. When her waiter approached to ask if she wanted to order dessert, she smiled politely and signed something I didn't understand. The waiter nodded awkwardly and walked away. Emily pulled out her phone, typed a few words, and her face fell slightly, maybe canceling the cab she had hoped to share with someone. I didn't think. I just stood up, walked over, and gently tapped her table. She looked up, startled, her eyes flicking from my face to my lips, reading carefully. I said slowly, "Would you mind if I sit here for a while, just until you finish your drink?" She blinked in surprise but nodded. I grabbed a napkin, wrote on it, "I saw what happened. You don't deserve that. People can be cruel, but you're not the problem." She read it, and for a moment, her lip quivered. Then, with trembling fingers, she took out her phone and typed, "Thank you. You don't have to do this." I smiled and wrote, "I know, but I want to." We ended up talking, writing, for almost 2 hours. She told me about her life, her love for painting, her fear of being seen as broken. She lost her hearing at age 7 after a high fever damaged her auditory nerves. Growing up, she said, wasn't easy. Kids made fun of her for signing, teachers underestimated her, and as she got older, dates always ended the same way. People fascinated at first, then uncomfortable when they realized conversation would take effort. "I'm not someone's charity," she typed once. "I just want to be someone's choice." Those words stayed with me long after she left that night. When her cab arrived, she gave a soft wave and smiled, one that reached her eyes this time. She signed something before getting in, a gesture I didn't understand then, but somehow it felt like thank you. I thought that would be the last time I saw her, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. A week later, I was at a small local art gallery downtown, wandering among paintings I didn't really understand but wanted to feel closer to. Art had been my wife's passion. I was staring at a painting of a beach at dusk when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned, and there she was, Emily. Dressed in a pale yellow blouse, holding a sketchbook against her chest, smiling like she couldn't believe it was really me. She took out her phone, typed quickly, and showed it to me. "You came! That one's mine!" I looked at the painting again. It was titled Unheard Colors. It showed a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, her hair blowing in the wind, surrounded by a swirl of vivid blues, oranges, and pinks. It was breathtaking. I looked back at Emily, then at the art, and realized she had painted silence, and somehow made it beautiful. After that, we started meeting more often. Sometimes at cafes, sometimes in the park where she liked to draw. She taught me a few signs, and I learned that conversation didn't need sound. It just needed presence. I started carrying a small notebook, and we filled its pages with our words, her thoughts, my stories, our quiet laughter. She told me how her mother used to cry because she feared no one would ever understand Emily, and I told her how I still talk to my late wife when the house got too quiet. In a way, we both lived in worlds shaped by silence, hers by birth, mine by loss. One evening, we sat by a lake as the sun set behind the trees. Emily wrote on her sketch pad, "Do you ever miss the noise?" I thought for a moment before writing back sometimes, but lately, I've started liking the quiet. She smiled softly, resting her head on her knees as the wind brushed her hair. It was in that silence that I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't lonely. Over the months, our friendship deepened. I helped her with her art shows. She encouraged me to start painting again. The people who once pitied her began to admire her courage. She had this ability to make everyone around her slow down, listen differently, not with ears, but with hearts. But not everyone understood. One night, as I helped her pack after a gallery show, a friend of mine from work stopped by. He looked from me to her and said under his breath, "You're wasting your time, man. She can't even talk to you." He probably thought she couldn't hear him, but she saw his lips move, her face fell. She put her brushes down, picked up her bag, and walked out without a word. I caught up to her outside. The night was cold, and she stood beneath a streetlight, arms wrapped around herself, blinking back tears. She pulled out her phone and typed, "He's right. You deserve someone normal." I took her hand, gently turning her toward me. Then I wrote on her notepad, "You're not normal. You're extraordinary, and you'll make a different kind of wife, one who listens with her heart." She stared at the words for a long time, her eyes glistening. Then, slowly, she smiled, the kind of smile that holds both relief and disbelief. From that night on, things changed. Our bond grew stronger, deeper. We didn't need grand gestures or perfect words, just understanding. I started learning sign language seriously. The first sentence I learned to say to her was, "You make life beautiful." She laughed silently, her eyes bright with tears. A year later, I stood at that same gallery, this time not as a visitor, but as a part of her world. Emily's latest exhibition was a tribute to unheard love, a series of paintings showing moments of connection between people who communicated without sound. One of the pieces was of two hands reaching for each other in the dark, titled "Different Kind of Wife." That night, as the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, I knelt in front of her and signed, "As best as I could, will you marry me?" Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Then she nodded, tears streaming down her face. She signed back something that took me a second to understand. Yes, always. The gallery burst into applause, but for us the world was silent and perfect. We married in a small ceremony by the lake where we used to sit. There was no music, no spoken vows, just promises written on paper and signed with smiles. When I looked at her that day, in her simple white dress, I realized the universe speaks in ways we can't always hear, but always feel. Years have passed since that day. Emily still paints, still finds color in the quiet, and every night before bed she signs something to me that I've come to understand by heart. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep sharing stories that celebrate kindness, hope, and love in all their forms. And before you go, leave a comment below. Do you believe that love can be heard even in silence? Because sometimes, the loudest kind of love is the one that never needs a sound.